Vatic Ventures Corp. is a potash exploration company focused on the Korat Basin in Thailand, the world's largest undeveloped potash resource. Vatic's management has extensive potash exploration and development experience in Thailand. Vatic will have marketing advantage compared to Western producers. Drill program commences this spring. Vatic trades on the TSX Venture, symbol VCV, and on Frankfurt, symbol V8V2. Visit our website, vaticventures.com.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is market historian Bob Hoye. He's the chief investment strategist for chartsandmarkets.com. Welcome back to the show, Bob.
Yeah, hi, Jim. Here we are, and it's Friday, man. Let's celebrate it.
Bob, the so-called Yellow Vest protest in France, there's no sign that they're diminishing. And what does this remind you of? What's going on in Paris? And you said this is now spreading across Europe.
People are looking at how well their governing classes are living. They're looking at how well, at the promises the governing classes are making, and then they're looking at their own shtick and saying, hey, I'm not getting enough out of this. So it is a popular uprising, and it's very important. The last successful one was in the late 1980s. Berlin and East Germany were the focal points, also Poland. But the hinge on it, Jim, was when the border guards laid down their AK-47s and allowed East Germans to go across the border to shop. It was just cross-border shopping. Now, the dictator then of East Germany, Honecker, he had to change the law immediately that required him to murder Germans going from one part of Germany to another. That was such a wonderful police state. But the key to that one was at the top, you had Gorbachev and Reagan talking, but underneath it, the border guards laid down their rifles. And this goes way back because in the mid-1970s, I'd stumbled on some papers by Barbara Bell, and she was writing about climate change in ancient Egypt, where you would have favorable floods for a number of years, and that means more harvest each year, more prosperity, and more people. And then the climate would change, and then you would have poorer floods. And of course, there was less food, but as you know, the governing classes were living well, and the people, ordinary folks, not so well. And here was the exciting part about that one, was that the palace guards, who were protecting the upper classes, were not of the upper classes, they were of the people. So they, one day, they just laid down their spears, and the public took over government, and they went back to market distribution of food rather than the governing classes controlling it. So this is now what's appearing in Europe with these, and I got a note from one of our subscribers in Holland, and he had sent an article that pointed out that there the protests are a little milder than in France, and the police have said to the protesters, just don't do any property damage and we're with you. And of course this is coming out too in other countries where the uprising is becoming evident, and because it's the same story. The police are of the people. So I believe that this will be successful, because if you take a look at the last successful popular uprising in Eastern Europe in 1989, they took on a murderous police state. Gorbachev and Jaroslawski, or whatever his name was, they at one time, I read afterwards, were talking about sending in the guns and the tanks, which was done, and there was an uprising in East Germany in 1953, and the authorities sent in the tanks and the machine guns, and it was nasty and bloody, as was the Prague Spring in 1968 in Czechoslovakia. That one was nasty. So the fascinating part is there's an instant where those on top with the authoritarian fist lose the will to impose authority. And at the same time, the public who have been submissive and complacent, say, oops, this is changing. And it is changing. And you had, in the United States, the way I've looked at it, is that you had the popular uprising in 2015. The people are getting fed up, and especially with all this climate stuff being rammed down their throats. But what happened in the States is that it ended up that the public in the uprising chose Trump, and he ended up being its executive. I think in early days of his campaign, I don't think he really understood what was going on, but after a while, it sort of came together and worked out. And in Canada, you've had a provincial election in Ontario that was a definite turn to smaller government, and then a little while after that, one in Quebec. So things are changing in Canada, and when we read about it in Europe, it is very exciting stuff. But I think that these uprisings will eventually be seen as part of a much bigger movement, a reform movement, and then you get into similarities with the early 1600s. And the attempt at reform in Europe, Northern Europe, was nasty with the 30 Years' War, but in England it's best followed there, where the people got fed up with too much government. The phrase, Jim, I've been using is in your face and in your wallet government. And people just get fed up with it. So I think it'll continue. I think it'll be successful, and eventually it will be described in history as a great reformation, whereby all the facets between the agencies of government, the unneeded ones will be thrown out, and the needed ones will be reformed, going back to government by the people instead of government by the bureaucrats. So this is very exciting times, and it's nasty because those that have been in power for so long, there's sort of a tribal memory there. The politicians in office now, some of them been 25 years in power. Same with the bureaucrats, but there's sort of a tribal memory that for 100 years this experiment has gone on, and nobody really said no until recently, and the establishment has gone berserk, absolutely insane with its reactions, and mainly because it has never had to contend with no before. So I'm watching it, I'm enjoying it, and this, the way it goes in the States, the deep state is attempting to depose a sitting president. I don't know whether it'll be successful or not, but it is not going to be friendly for the financial markets. If you go back to the bull market peak in January of 1973, that was a natural high, and of course it was a natural bear market that followed. It was the worst since the 1930s, but at the end of that January and into February is when the Watergate scandal really got traction, and then it wasn't until about 5 years ago when the details came out on that one, but that was an attempt by big government, the deep state as it's now called, to depose a sitting president, and they were successful. And on this one, it's doubtful whether they'll be successful, and we'll just see how it goes.
Well,
and President
Trump has hired his own bodyguards instead of relying on the Secret Service. That's how he feels the situation.
He had his own bodyguards when he was campaigning.
Yes.
Yeah, and he'd had that before. He also had his own intelligence gathering system as well. So he's a remarkable man, perhaps too brusque, but you've got to be brutally tough because the deep state is brutally tough. So the struggle is fascinating. I hope that the transition goes much quieter in Canada than in the U.S.
Do you think Maxime Bernier is the kind of person that would be more of your sort, where he wants to get government intervention out of most places?
Yeah, he's very good, but I think too libertarian to be presentable as a leader of a major political party. I think that in Canada, the Conservatives are playing a quiet game, but I think come the election in October, they're going to be tough and mean as possible, and I think there's a high probability that the Conservatives will win. It'll be throwing out a government that's trying to replicate the late 1960s with socialism, guaranteed incomes. Yes, we need to do a $10 billion deficit, but now it's up to $40 billion. So, no, these are dangerous people in Ottawa right now.
We'll have more with Bob Hoye right after this.
I'm Douglas Mason, CEO of Naturally Splendid, symbol NSP on the TSX Venture Exchange. Naturally Splendid is a biotechnology and consumer products company focused on the global cannabis and health markets. Naturally Splendid is expanding distribution in this rapidly growing market with products currently in Canada, the USA, South Korea, Germany, and Australia. To view our comprehensive company presentation and for more information, please visit our website at naturallysplendid.com.
I'm Kelly Jennings, CEO of PowerBand Solutions. PowerBand is a cloud-based provider of auction, inventory, and finance solutions that make buying, selling, and financing vehicles more efficient. PowerBand Solutions trades on the TSX Venture Exchange symbol PBX and on the OTCQB symbol PWWPF and on Frankfurt symbol 1ZV. For more information, please visit us at powerbandsolutions.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Bob Hoye. Bob, on the subject of carbon taxes and trying to control the climate, Stuart Muir from the Resource Works Society has an interesting idea. He says if Canada wants the world to lower its carbon footprint, then we should export as much LNG as we can so that countries like India and China that rely on coal can use LNG instead, which is much cleaner.
Oh, yeah, that's a good idea, but you got to look at the incredible audacity of these people. For example, the concept that a committee in a central bank can manage a national economy. It's ego like you wouldn't believe. There's no such thing as a national economy. Let's take a look at trying to manage the economy of Canada distinct from that of the U.S. So there is no such thing as a national economy. And it's all been a fraud. You can take the Federal Reserve. The original promoters in the early part of the 1900s said that with the Federal Reserve System, it would be able to prevent the financial hits that then precede a recession. So recessions were not going to be around. And since the Fed opened its doors in January of 1914, there's been 18 recessions. So theory doesn't work. But the reason why Keynesian economics has become dominant is because it enhances the power of the state, and it also enhances its revenues because when it can't tax too much, then they it's state theft through currency depreciation. So that is the public on the next recession will probably realize that all of that is hoax stuff. Like, I mean, they spent trillions of dollars trying to prevent bad things from happening, and if we get into a recession, that'll be seen as a bad thing. And then on the other hand, it's a more recent audacity, which is the idea that a committee can set the temperature of the nearest planet. I mean, this is stuff that hitherto would only be attributed to gods. And of course, the linkage is carbon dioxide, as they say. And it's not just ordinary carbon dioxide molecules. There's something special about the carbon dioxide that is emitted by modern society in industry and transportation and cars and households. And it's absolutely nonsensical because there is no formal proof that carbon dioxide causes heating, and definitely no history. You take the chart of temperature and amounts of CO2 in the atmosphere, on the major swings, when you get into a period of rising temperatures, like coming out of the Little Ice Age, or any of the ones beforehand, the increase in temperatures of the climate lead the increase in atmospheric CO2 by 600 or 800 years. So if you want to go to cause and effect, rising temperatures causes an increase in CO2. It's not the other way around. And so all of this stuff about carbon taxes, which we have in British Columbia because the previous premier, Gordon Campbell, had talked to Arnold Schwarzenegger, and Arnold thought it was a good idea, so we got carbon taxes in BC, and then this latest push to increase them or coordinate them by the federal government is ridiculous. Actually, it's providing a very good election issue for this coming October. So we live in very interesting times.
We'll have more with Bob Hoye right after this.
Grand Portage Resources recently completed the 2018 drill program on its 100% controlled Herbert Gold Discovery property located in the prolific Juneau Belt in southeast Alaska. Drill results are expected through late 2018. Past drill results included numerous multi-ounce gold assays on multiple veins. Grand Portage trading symbols are GPG on the TSX Venture, GPTRF on the OTCQB, and GPB on Frankfurt. For more information, please visit our website, grandportage.com.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Bob Hoye. Bob, talking about the protests in France, Belgium, Holland, about high taxes and rich people having so many more benefits than the average person. Could you see that coming to North America? I mean, after all, less than 1% of the world's population controls more than half the world's assets.
That's always a good one about the 1% controlling. Authoritarian governments have been in control. And the proof of that one is that they have a national currency, either in Canada or the U.S., and it has given up, about 96% of its purchasing power since 1914, using the U.S. dollar as the example. So the power is in government, and their propaganda has run its course. But The carbon taxes, I think it's going to be an election issue because there's just two ways to go about it. Say, well, it's used to increase taxes, and they think that saving the world is a very compelling sizzle in order to make an increase in taxes appealing or acceptable. But I think by the time we get to the fall, people are going to say, no, this is just not working. As Victor Hugo wrote hundreds of years ago, there's nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come. That's not a direct quote, but it's approximate. And this is where we're at now. The public is beginning to realize that the two concepts of managing the economy isn't going to be working, and the other one, the idea of managing the temperature of the earth and that CO2 is a control knob, is utter nonsense. And I think one cold winter will do it. The temperature over the last couple of years actually has been cooling, coming off of an El Nino weather event. And even the Danish Meteorological Institute has noted that Greenland has had two exceptional summer melt periods where the melt was much, much less than had been accumulated during the winter season. So when the Danish Met Office says that conditions in Greenland have been extraordinary, you got to listen to them. But at the same time, you can see an article in Scientific American saying that Greenland's losing ice like mad. They're just not looking at the data from the Danish Meteorological Society Institute. So there's a world of delusion going on there, and where I watch the climate stuff is like the snow cover. You can get that for Northern Hemisphere and Northern North America. Snow cover is the last couple of years been at the high side of the trend. The ice thickness, the ice volume in the Arctic is unusually high over the last few years, and they're actually the snow research people at Rutgers University. They keep track of snow cover, and the snow cover for North America for the month of November, the highest on record, and the record goes back to 1966, and it's been increasing for the last 4 or 5 years. So these are the ones to look at, that the ambitious climate warmer guys have been altering temperature records, but they haven't, it's beyond their capacity to alter snow and ice cover and the amount of ice thickness in the Arctic and stuff like that. So one has to be independent and look at other things than government published temperature histories of, say, the last 25 years. They've lowered temperature records from 25 years ago, and then the ones they're putting in currently, they put in higher than they actually are. So it's called cooking the books, and they've been doing it.
The Dutch researchers just released a study that says there will not be enough silver and rare earths to build future solar and wind generation sites that will meet all the goals of the people who want alternative energy to be the answer to everything. Oh,
yeah. The amount of material needed to build one wind turbine is staggering. The bigger they get, hell, they got to dig a hole 100 feet deep in the ground, and they fill it up with cement. Where do they get that from? They fill it up with rebar. Where do they get that from? And then they are generating units. They have a whole lot of very rare metals and items and stuff like that in it. And then they don't work when the wind doesn't blow. So every unit of solar or wind capacity added to the system has to be matched by an equivalent amount of power, either from coal or from natural gas, that is going to run when you need it. Because these other two, although people think they're free, they use up huge space. These wind farms and solar arrays, they immense space, Jim. And even if you want to get all your energy from growing corn, you'd have to have, I don't know, I saw a figure like 20,000 acres of corn for a little bit of product. So there's those who have control or have had control are in a fantasy land. They don't quite realize it. And they're very ambitious to have their point of view imposed upon the public. And you've got, like, British Broadcasting Corp in England, within the last year came out with an edict that anybody discussing climate cannot have anybody on who would present an alternative view or would be skeptical. And the whole basis of science is skepticism anyways. So it's becoming quite authoritarian when you have government agencies, of which the BBC is, and also in Canada the CBC is a government agency, preventing any view that they don't approve. England went through that in the early 1600s with the Star Chamber and Archbishop Laud, and if you were not politically correct then, you would have a large portion of your state confiscated. And not satisfied with that, they'd take a knife and trim your ears off. And then not satisfied with that, they'd take a red-hot branding iron and brand you on the face as a heretic. So fortunately, the governing people in North America are not there yet. And just as fortunately, there is a strong opposition growing. And I think we all want to watch the yellow shirts in Europe. Now, the ironical thing about the yellow vests is that by law in France, they have to be carried in each car in case of an emergency. So there's an enforcement by the state is now being used to run against the state. So we live in interesting times.
Bob, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Yeah, Jim, we'll talk more about markets next week.
My guest has been market historian Bob Hoye, although I think today you were more of just a historian.
Yes.
He's the chief investment strategist for chartsandmarkets.com. You're listening to HowStreet.com radio. Find us on Twitter at HowStreet. You can forward questions to Bob or any of our other guests at info@HowStreet.com, our YouTube channel, Talk Digital Network. I'm Jim Goddard. Thanks for listening.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.